The first 9 months of the second Trump administration have been defined by a radical and aggressive assault on the global economic and political order, centered on an escalating confrontation with China. This period has seen the deployment of sweeping tariffs, the invocation of emergency powers for economic and military purposes, and a significant realignment of geopolitical forces. While domestic institutions in the United States, including the courts and business communities, have struggled to act as effective checks on this agenda, China has emerged as a primary and strategic counterweight. Beijing has responded to Washington's unpredictable, transactional policies with a calculated mixture of firm retaliation, targeted economic statecraft, and long-term geopolitical maneuvering, through tit-for-tat tariffs, the leveraging of its dominance in critical supply chains like rare earths, and the projection of a new axis of influence alongside Russia and North Korea. China has not only weathered the storm but has actively exploited the vacuums created by America's shifting foreign policy. The result is an accelerated transition toward a more contested and multipolar world order, where the rules of engagement are being rewritten in real time, not just in Washington but also in Beijing. From his first day back in office on January 20, 2025, the administration unleashed a flurry of executive actions designed to fundamentally reshape America's role in the world. At the heart of this agenda was a promise to correct perceived trade imbalances and reclaim American manufacturing, with one country squarely in the crosshairs: China. During the campaign, promises of a 60% tariff on Chinese goods were made. While many observers on Wall Street and in Washington initially dismissed this as rhetoric, the administration's actions proved them wrong. The central question that emerged was not if Trump would act, but who or what could possibly restrain him. In the early months of 2025, it became clear that traditional American guardrails, the courts, Congress, the business community, were either unwilling or unable to temper this radical agenda. Instead, the most formidable check on American power would come from the target of its policies, China itself. On February 1st, citing national security concerns over fentanyl trafficking, President Trump invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to impose a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports, which quickly rose to 20% by March. This was just the opening salvo. On April 2nd, dubbed Liberation Day by the administration, a universal baseline tariff of 10% was announced for nearly all countries, but the real escalation was reserved for Beijing. In a rapid, tit-for-tat exchange, U.S. tariffs on China spiraled upwards. After China retaliated against the initial moves, the White House announced a further hike, bringing the total effective tariff rate on most Chinese goods to a staggering 145% by mid-April. This wasn't just a trade dispute. It was economic warfare conducted via executive order. The administration justified its authority under IEEPA and national security statutes like Section 232 by passing Congress. While these moves were immediately challenged in U.S. courts, the legal process proved slow. Federal courts did rule the IEEPA tariffs illegal in May, but an immediate appeal by the administration allowed the duties to remain in effect pending a final decision, which could take months. For American businesses and consumers, the damage was already being done. Major retailers like Target and Walmart reported rising costs, with the price of a Barbie doll, for example, jumping over 40% since April. The administration's China Plus One strategy, encouraging businesses to move supply chains out of China, was effectively blown up, as new tariffs also hit alternative manufacturing hubs, like Vietnam and India. While Washington's approach was a whirlwind of threats and sudden policy shifts, Beijing's response was methodical and strategically sequenced. Initially, China's official media was restrained, avoiding a propaganda campaign and personal criticism of President Trump, likely a top-level decision to keep a channel open for direct negotiation. But as U.S. tariffs escalated in April, China's restraint ended. It opted for rapid, forceful retaliation. When the US rate hit 34%, China immediately matched it. When it jumped to 84%, China matched it again. But Beijing didn't just play a numbers game. It deployed its own unique economic weapons, tools it had been developing for years in anticipation of this very moment. Export controls. China imposed strict export controls on critical materials where it holds a near monopoly. This included rare earth elements like gallium and germanium, essential for semiconductors, and later, rare earth magnets, which are vital for the U.S. auto, tech, and defense industries. This move exposed a critical vulnerability in Washington's supply chain, a vulnerability the U.S. was unprepared for. The Unreliable Entities List. Beijing placed several prominent U.S. companies on its Unreliable Entities List, targeting them for specific restrictions and signaling to the American business community that access to the Chinese market could no longer be taken for granted. Strategic defiance. When U.S. tariffs reached 145%, China raised its own to 125%. But publicly declared it would henceforth ignore America's numbers game, stating that further hikes were economically meaningless. This was a powerful rhetorical move, portraying the U.S. as irrational and positioning China as the more stable actor. Throughout this, China's messaging was one of calm defiance. A foreign ministry spokesperson stated flatly, "China does not want to fight these wars but is not scared of them." This confident posture was a far cry from the first trade war during Trump's first term. Beijing now believed it was much closer to parity with the United States and was better equipped to absorb and inflict economic pain. The conflict quickly expanded beyond economics. On September 3, 2025, the world watched as Beijing hosted a massive military parade. The spectacle was not just about the hardware on display, new missiles and drones, but about who was watching it. Flanking President Xi Jinping were Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Russia's President Vladimir Putin walks with China's President Xi Jinping and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un before a military parade in Beijing's Tiananmen Square on Sept 3, 2025. This gathering of America's chief adversaries, dubbed an axis of upheaval by some analysts, was a powerful projection of a new, coalescing bloc challenging us global leadership. The message was unmistakable, and it was received in Washington. President Trump took to Truth Social, posting, "Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America." His fury underscored the futility of his previous attempts to build personal relationships with these strongmen. They were now aligning against him. This alignment is a direct consequence of the Trump administration's America First foreign policy. By treating allies in Europe and Asia as transactional partners, questioning security guarantees, and dismantling international aid programs, Washington has created a geopolitical vacuum. China has been more than willing to fill it. Beijing has skillfully exploited drifts in the transatlantic alliance, positioning itself as a more stable and predictable partner compared to an erratic United States. This is all part of a long-term strategy, underpinned by initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, a global infrastructure project designed to cement China's economic and geopolitical influence across continents. The administration's confrontational stance extends to its military and domestic policy. The Pentagon has been reshaped under a new warrior ethos, with executive orders gutting diversity, equity, and inclusion day programs and banning transgender service members. More alarmingly, the administration has blurred the lines between military and civilian spheres. Invoking a national emergency at the southern border, Trump has deployed nearly 10,000 active duty troops for immigration enforcement. In an unprecedented move, he federalized the National Guard to respond to protests in Los Angeles and has proposed using the Bay Military Prison to detain migrants. These actions represent a significant expansion of executive power and a militarization of domestic policy that was once unimaginable. This domestic focus contrasts with China's military modernization, which remains fixed on countering the United States. While the U.S. possesses technologically superior systems like the B-21 stealth bomber, China has invested heavily in a strategy of missiles, and more missiles to create an asymmetric threat to U.S. carriers and bases in the Pacific. The parade in Beijing was a clear showcase of this strategy, intended to signal that China can challenge American military dominance in its own backyard. The relentless escalation of the first few months eventually gave way to a phone call between Trump and Xi on June 5, their first since the inauguration, marked a turning point. Talks in Geneva and Stockholm led to a temporary tariff truce in May, which was extended in August for another 90 days, pushing the next deadline to November 10, 2025. This pause lowered U.S. tariffs on China from 145% to 30% and China's on the U.S. from 125% to 10%. Providing breathing room for both economies and averting a full-blown trade embargo before the critical holiday shopping season. But this is a truce, not a peace. The core conflicts remain unresolved. The U.S. continues to target China's tech sector, recently striking a deal to allow NVIDIA and AMD to export certain AI chips to China, but only in exchange for a 15% levy on their sales, a direct government equity stake in private business. And just in August, the administration slapped a new 50% tariff on copper products, signaling the trade war is simply shifting to new fronts. In 9 short months, the Trump administration has profoundly altered the global landscape. Its aggressive, unpredictable policies have been met not by domestic restraint, but by a surprisingly effective and strategic counterpunch from Beijing. China has demonstrated that it has the tools, the confidence, and the long-term vision to stand up to Washington. While American businesses and allies are left navigating the uncertainty, Beijing is busy building a world order less dependent on the United States. The era of unchallenged American supremacy is over. The question now is what will replace it.